I don't have COVID yet, but I will soon. I work at a grocery store in Pullman, Washington, which at the time of this recording has the fifth highest rate of new COVID cases per capita. And I interact with literally hundreds of people every day. And when I'm off the clock, I'm not a representative of my store, and this is in no way a comment on the safety precautions or policies thereof. No, I'm just a man who works on the ground level with a dire warning. And despite my concern for inciting panic, I can no longer in good conscience sit idly by, seeing how things will likely play out without at least trying to warn people. Because there's a perfect storm brewing. There's a nightmare scenario in the works, and nobody around me seems to realize it. At the moment, the local outbreak seems isolated to students, but it will not stay that way. And over the next few minutes, I will explain how we got ourselves in this situation, where we're heading, and why you should be concerned no matter where you live. It's been bittersweet watching for the past few weeks as students have descended from all over the world onto this small town. See, the local economy is highly dependent on the school and would surely collapse without the students. But at the same time, many come from areas rife with the disease, alongside those from areas that, as of yet, have been sheltered from the pandemic. Places not so unlike Pullman. For months, I've listened to locals scoff, saying, "What are we at, like 3 cases in all of Whitman County?" See, here it's viewed as Seattle's problem. There's this pervasive us versus them mentality that blames the West Side whenever it's convenient. Inslee's quarantine orders are viewed as, we'll say, executive overreach, to put it lightly, or out-of-touch regulations that are indiscriminately applied to everyone, when the real problem's in Seattle. And you see, there's this natural progression in like the sense of alarm that happen in people as the number of infected gradually increases. As cases go from 1 a day to 5, from 10 a day to 20, it becomes more and more real to the individual. People oftentimes struggle to grasp with the reality of a situation until it affects them or someone they know personally. And with the sudden influx of students, it's a shock to the system. There isn't the usual time afforded to the average person's perspective to adjust. If you live in an unaffected area, think of the precautions those around you are making and try to imagine what would happen if within a couple weeks there were suddenly hundreds of cases popping up and every one of those people were wandering around the town for days before they started showing any symptoms at all, exposing everyone around them. Yes, the students are bringing them. They were told not to come, but honestly, the local institutions lied to them to trap them here. The college assured everyone that classes would be in person, knowing full well that if people knew they'd be taking online classes, they'd opt for cheaper prices of an online university or take a year off. Some of the leasing agencies put out ads saying that if in-person classes were canceled, students would be able to get out of their leases, but conveniently left that clause out of their rental contracts. Many are here because they're locked into contracts and can't afford rent in two places. But at the same time, many more, admittedly, when given the option of taking online classes at home with their parents or taking them off in their own place and being able to party every weekend, chose the latter, like anyone would. Yes, the students are bringing it here. But when you ask a student to put a mask on, they just do it. It's the locals that will curse you out, scream in your face, call your boss, try to get you fired, and try to get your store shut down, all while crying oppression. Right now it's mostly students, but it will not stay that way. They use the same grocery stores, ATMs, and restaurants as the locals. Locals who are largely not prepared to accept the reality of the situation and take precautions. So the cases will continue to skyrocket. Medicine will fly off the shelves. You're gonna wish that you owned a bidet. Once we reach a tipping point where sick people are everywhere and you can't find medicine or go to the doctors, and the people who can will flee the sinking ship. And those of us who can't. The authorities will tell them to stay in place, but in the same way that way more people than expected showed up, people will head home. See, everybody wants to tell themselves, it'll be okay if it's just me. But it's never just you. And if they're on the fence, ready to do the right thing and sacrifice themselves for the greater good, their parents will convince them to come home, completely disregarding the safety of their community. I mean, wouldn't you? If your baby was in an out-of-control hotspot with no medicine and no hospital beds, what wouldn't you do to get them home safe? And when the sick migrate, it won't be a local hotspot anymore. You can tell yourself that the vast majority will head back to the west side, but you'd be wrong. Sure, many from WSU are from the greater Seattle area, but there are world-renowned programs here. Plus, only 8 miles away is another college town in another state with different leadership and different regulations. Now, if you want to get an idea of how much commerce there is between the two towns, let me paint you a picture. First off, you have the state with the highest minimum wage next to the state with the lowest. Low-income workers like myself covet the jobs in Pullman. At the same time, there are way more things to do in Idaho. More stores and restaurants because their workers make crumbs, and Washingtonians can afford to patronize the businesses there. Now, Washington has legal recreational marijuana, but high taxes on alcohol. So, people flock to Idaho for liquor and Washington for bud. And then just a few days ago, in response to the surge of college COVID cases, the local police finally started to enforce the rules, fining party hosts, but it's too little too late. Yes, it's much quieter in Pullman tonight, but I'd be willing to bet that it's just a little bit louder 8 miles away. If Pullman is a hotspot, Moscow, Idaho is close behind. And for those of you who still think Inslee is oppressing the little guy for sake of the big cities, the events to follow surrounding these two towns should serve as a lesson on why rules couldn't be applied county by county. Doing so would necessarily accelerate the spread by incentivizing businesses from strict areas to lax ones. So, what can be done? It would be unfair of me to paint this bleak picture without a solution. Because life's fair, right? There's a simple solution, but it probably won't happen. Because it would require everyone to collectively stop being so selfish. First, everybody needs to consult a PPE guide written by a medical professional for proper procedures. No one can be perfect, but if we all try, it will make a difference. I kid you not. The other day, I literally saw a guy pull down his mask, sneeze directly into his hand, then pull his mask up and keep shopping. When masks don't work, this is why. Students, if it's possible for you to go home, do it. But not before very carefully going to the store, buying enough food for a few weeks, and self-quarantine here and there. You might be sick and not even know it. And you might be sick and not show a single sign. Now, locals, it's time to put on your big boy panties and take some responsibility. Anyone who lives in a small town and claims to care about the community needs to start acting like it. No matter what your opinion is on this whole situation, how dangerous you think it is, or whether or not you even believe in it, you need to ask yourself, what happens if I'm wrong? If it's much ado about nothing, what's the worst that could happen by you taking the proper procedures? Friends might tease you. You might end up feeling silly, especially looking back. On the other hand, if you're flippant about the whole situation and you're wrong, you could lose your life. Or worse yet, you could survive, but end up being responsible for the death of someone you love. Now, I won't pretend that there isn't something to be said about the economic ramifications. That's an entire other conversation. The local economy will take a serious hit if and when the majority of students leave. I will say that in my experience, however, while people aren't crazy about the idea of being quarantined, what really bothers them is the insecurity of losing their income, not being able to pay their bills or feed their families. So those of you with the power to do something about it, that's on you. If we're going to stop this calamity, it's time we all took a moment to look at the roles we play and the differences we can make for better or worse. My hope is that a year from now, I end up looking a little silly for putting this out there. But if this video saves even one life, that is a risk I'm happy to take.